Hey everyone, this is Matthew Kent. Happy New Year. You might not be watching this during the New Year. I'm actually recording this though, the last day of 2016. And so New Year's always a big time for reflection. And I was thinking about all the books that I've read this year, all the books that I'm excited about reading next year. And so I wanted to share with you the five that I enjoyed the most and that I'd recommend to you, and share with you a few of the ideas that I learned from them. And so I'm not covering every book that I read in 2016, and I'm not even, in terms of coming up with the top five list, I'm not even evaluating all of them. Not all of them are eligible. So really, I'm not focusing on any of the fiction books that I read, and I'm not focusing on the Bible, which I read every year. I'm focusing on something that is pretty new for me that I did this year, and that's the reading of quality nonfiction books that will challenge my thinking and help me to grow as a person. Not necessarily self-help per se, although some of them kind of lean that way. But these are just good books that I think are beneficial to everyone. And so here we go, counting down top five list. Number five, an oldie but a goodie, is The Secrets of Closing the Sale by Zig Ziglar. I actually listened to this one as an audiobook. And if you choose to read this book, I highly recommend, unless you're really averse to audiobooks, I recommend the audiobook. Zig is a fantastic speaker. A few of the chapters he just reads directly, and some of them are actually presentations that he gave where he went over the material from the book. And so those are highly engaging. There's a live audience there during the taping of that, so you get to hear the audience reaction to all of his stories. And Zig is an amazing speaker. Like I said, I think you'll highly enjoy the audiobook version. The big idea of the book is that you can get whatever you want in life if you'll help enough people get what they want. And I think that's so important for all of us to remember, that the goal is generosity, that we want to be ones who are giving with our life. And even if you're going out trying to earn a profit, the profits will follow if you are helpful and useful. So a couple other ideas that I pulled out of this book. One was the interesting observation that we don't buy products, we buy the perceived benefit of the product. We buy what the product does for us. And so the example he gives is, nobody buys braces. You buy straight teeth. But braces are the way to do that. So nobody wants braces, but you want straight teeth. And so when you're selling, you want to focus on what it is that the other person gains out of it. Another one, this is interesting to think about if you ever start up a business or are part of a business or part of a, become like an entrepreneur or a solopreneur. And this was a really interesting quote. He said, "Selling is the only thing that contributes to profit. Everything else only contributes to cost." So that is well worth thinking about, that at the end of the day, selling is where the money gets made, and everything else is basically just racking up your costs. So that's something worth thinking about for me as I eventually want to start selling things and moving into the sphere of making money online, that ultimately selling is where money comes in. Number four is The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss. I didn't plan it out that number 4 would be The 4-Hour Workweek. It just kind of worked out that way. Very famous book, very good book. So the subheading of that is escaping 9 to 5 and joining the new rich, something like that. So in other words, his thing is, he calls it lifestyle design. So in other words, instead of being the normal kind of person who just sort of shows up to work from 9 to 5 and pushes papers around, that you can sort of hack the system and do things a little bit differently than everybody else, that you can travel, that you can have these sort of micro adventures, these mini retirements, and you can negotiate work away from work, where you can like work from home, and he gives you scripts of what you might say to your boss to work that out. He lays out templates for how you might start an online business that makes money for you while you sleep. Overall, very good book, very challenging book. Here's some of the ideas that I got out of it. One of the big things that he said that I thought was so interesting is, he says, a big predictor of your success is how many uncomfortable conversations you're willing to have. So that's a really big theme in this book, that you've sort of got to get out of your comfort zone into the discomfort zone. And another quote that he said that's along those lines is, the most important actions are never comfortable. One of the other big ideas I got out of this book was about, hey, you've got to start now. And so he says, someday is a disease that will take your dreams to the grave with you. That's a horrifying quote. And talking about people and the fact that, sometimes people in your life sort of subconsciously, whether they know it or not, actually end up holding you down, thinking they're looking out for your best interest. One thing that he says is that if you get started, you can sort of fight some of that, because he says this, most people are fast to stop you before you get started, but they're hesitant to get in the way if you're moving. So in other words, if you just start whatever it is that you're thinking of doing, somebody won't talk you out of it. Whereas if you came up and you say, hey, I have this idea that maybe someday I'll do this, they'll give you 1,000,001 reasons why it's a bad idea, and they'll prevent you from doing it. So don't do that. Instead, tell them that you've already started and here's what's happening. And by the way, actually, so fun story. My YouTube channel got started based off of some of those principles, where I was thinking, okay, I want to start a YouTube channel someday, like he says, which is a disease that'll take your dreams to the grave. And then I realized that, well, I can't keep saying someday. I need to just get in there and put out a video, even if the video is terrible. So I made the decision at work one day that before the day was over, I was going to put a video on YouTube. And it was a dumb video. You can look for it and find it. It's at the beginning of my channel. I went to Chick-fil-A. I was standing in line because it was a free chicken sandwich day or something like that. There was a long line. I just pulled out my camera and I shot like a 1-minute video, and it was terrible. But it was incredibly worthwhile because it got things moving. And so sometimes that's the point. You put something out there that's terrible, not because you think it's good, but because you just need to get going. Anyways, number 3, steal like an artist. I believe the guy, it was by Austin Keaton. This one I got from the library. I'm glad I didn't do the audiobook version of it. It's a short book, but it's very beautifully laid out, beautifully designed. I think I finished it in like 2 hours. This one was so cool because it was actually recommended to me by somebody who watched my bullet journal video, a dude's bullet journal walkthrough. I mentioned how everything that was cool that I was doing I stole from somebody else. And so somebody said, hey, you should read Steal Like an Artist. One of the things that was most valuable about this book was just the thought-provoking quotes that he pulls from other people. And so here are a couple of my favorites. What is originality? Undetected plagiarism. That's from a guy who I've never heard of, William Ralph Inge. Then this one from Mark Twain, who I have heard of. It's better to take what does not belong to you than to let it lie around. And so I think that one is really good, that, you have these things that people have come up with that nobody's ever heard of, and they're just sort of lying around useless. And so part of what you're doing is, taking somebody else's stuff and representing it to the world. And of course, it's not about plagiarism. You always want to give credit and cite sources whenever that's applicable. But sort of, it's more how originality actually works. And so I think this quote sums up the book pretty well. He says, and this is a quote from the author, "No one is born with a style or a voice. We don't come out of the womb knowing who we are. In the beginning, we learn by pretending to be our heroes, by copying." So that was a great book. I checked that one out of the library. I'm considering buying that book at some point. I think it'd be a great book to just kind of, like a coffee table book, leave it out. People could kind of open it up and look through it. There's not a lot of text on any one page. It's very unintimidating to read, very beautifully produced. So I might end up buying that one. Number 2 is actually this one right here. I'm cheating a little bit having it on the list because I'm not quite done. I'm almost done. But it definitely deserves to be number 2 on the list. And that is Start With Why by Simon Sinek. And so here's the basic premise of this book, is that most organizations can tell you what they do, and some people in the organization can even tell you how they do it. But the most important thing is actually why. And the why can be very hard to communicate, but the idea is the organization needs to start around its why, its purpose, and find people that believes what it believes and value what it values, and then figure out how they're going to serve that audience that believes what they believe. And then everything that you do, the whats of what you do, are just there to reinforce the why, the what you believe. And so that's the order that it goes. It needs to start with why, as the book is called, and move out from there into how and into what. And so, incredibly powerful book, incredibly thought-provoking. And here is one of my favorite quotes from it. He says, "The goal is not simply to do business with anyone who wants what you have, but to do business with people who believe what you believe." And I think that's 100% true. So even if you're not going into business or trying to sell anything, trying to make money online, trying to start an organization, do any of these kind of things, really the principles here will apply to any sort of leadership. And so some of the examples he gives examples of companies. He talks about like Apple and Harley Davidson. But he also talks about people who are just innovators. So he talks about the Wright brothers and inventing flight, and just people who are heroes and influential in general. So of course, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. So if you want to be influential, impactful, I think it's an absolute must-read of a book. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. And unless there's something in the last few pages that's absolutely terrible, I can honestly say I give it a wholehearted recommendation. Last book, drum roll, number 1, by a mile. I wish I had it here so I could hold it up and show you. The Icarus Deception by Seth Godin. Now, I can't guarantee that you will love this book as much as I loved it, and I loved it. But I can honestly say that no book that I read this year was as impactful on me as this book was. And so kind of the big idea, so the title references the myth, the Greek myth of Icarus. And many of you are probably familiar with the myth that, he sort of had these wings that were made of wax. And so what ended up happening is he flew too close to the sun, and the wings melted, and that was bad. Now, Seth Godin's point is that the moral of the story, as it's usually told, is that, hey, you shouldn't fly too high. You should just try to keep your head down, not try to stand out, not try to do anything big or important, because you might fly too close to the sun, and it's sort of dangerous up there is the point. But that's actually not the point of the original myth. The original myth, Icarus was warned, don't get too close to the sun, but also don't get too close to the water, because your wax wings will get wet and they won't work anymore. And so sort of Seth Godin's point is that we have all settled, and that we could all be doing so much more than we're doing if it weren't for the fact that we've settled. And so this quote from the book, I think, sums it up the best. It doesn't have to do with the Icarus myth, but it has to do with the popular phrase sink or swim. So here's what he says: "We've greatly exaggerated the risk of sinking without celebrating the value of swimming." And so I think that's a good point, because you talk about this sink or swim, and you usually label something as risky. Oh, it's sink or swim. But when you think about it, for most of us, we've been swimming millions of times. Swimming is risky. You could drown, but swimming is not that risky, and it's greatly valuable. We all probably have great life memories from the pool or the ocean or the lake or whatever. And so I think this metaphor that he used there speaks to me really powerfully, that in terms of going out and maybe becoming an artist or starting a business or doing whatever, as a culture, we tend to exaggerate the danger and the risk of sinking, and not celebrate enough the value of swimming. So some of the other ideas that I pulled out here. So he talks a lot about art, that important work, he calls it art. And so he broadens the definition of art beyond just painting. I love this quote. This is how he defines art. "Art is the truly human act of creating something that matters to another person." Art is the truly human act of creating something that matters to another person. That is a profound definition. And then comes this. So this is what's so important, is that, relating to the point of the book that we're sort of all settling. He says this: "You are hiding your best work, your best insight, and your best self from us every day." This quote has been so huge. I would not be putting this video out right now if it weren't for this quote. I get so scared when I'm putting things out online that there'll be haters, that there'll be people who think this video is not as good as some of your other videos, or whatever. We all face what he calls the resistance. We face this fear, and it's sort of this irrational thing. But what I have to remember is I do have insights that are valuable, that other people can benefit from. And so even if my video is not a huge hit that shakes the world and goes viral, if one person is impacted, it was well worth it. And the fact of the matter is, people can be impacted. And so if I don't share, I'm actually withholding something that really you would almost say would be my responsibility to share. And so the whole reason that even I have the confidence to keep making videos, to keep doing all the things that I'm doing, is because of quotes like this and because of this book. This book has been more motivating to me to keep going than any other. So a couple other good quotes I thought. He says, art has no right answer. The best we can hope for is an interesting answer. Another one, he says, if you announce that you have no talent in anything, then you're hiding. And so this goes back to that other idea I mentioned, that like, hey, we're all hiding. We all letting, to some extent, fear control us, and we should all be putting ourselves out there more. Last quote I'll share, he says, you don't need a guru, you need experience, the best kind of experience, the experience of repeated failure. And so that's one of the big, that might be the biggest life-changing, paradigm-shifting thing that I've learned all year in 2016, was that failure is not the opposite of success. Only in the short term, I guess I should say, failure is the opposite of success. In reality, in terms of long-term success, repeated failure is the stepping stone to success. And to some extent, I've always known that intellectually, and we all hear about Thomas Edison, and I think he has that quote, something like, I didn't find a way to make a light bulb, I found 1,000 ways to not make a light bulb. It's a loose paraphrase of a quote. But we know this value of persistence and of keeping on trying. But to some extent, that's not the message that I've internalized as part of the way that I operate. Instead, I've been operating under, it might fail, I shouldn't do it. And that's wrong. If it could fail, and it probably will fail, you probably should do it, because good things can come out of it. You can keep growing, and you can make progress and get to where you eventually want to go. So those are my top 5 books of this year. I'll definitely link to them all below. Secrets of Closing the Sale by Zig Ziglar, 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss, Steal Like an Artist, Austin Keaton, Start With Why, Simon Sinek, and of course number 1, The Icarus Deception, Seth Godin. I recommend you check any of those out. You can get them from the library. You can buy them. I'll put all the links below. One of the things that I recommend, I'll put a link below where you can sign up for Audible, where you can get 2 free ebooks. I think until the end of 2017, the link will be for 2 free ebooks. And that's what I did with some of these. I did it for sure with Secrets of Closing the Sale. I highly recommend listening to audiobooks. The amazing thing about an audiobook is that you don't need to give it your full attention. And so with a book, with a video, you need to give it your full attention. With an audiobook, you can listen while you're doing routine tasks at work, or while you're doing the dishes, or while you're mowing the lawn. And I have done all of those things. So anyways, those are my top 5 books. Check out the link below for Audible. Sign up, get your 2 free ebooks. Pick 2 of these. Maybe Start With Why and The Icarus Deception. Let's just say, pick the top 2. And I hope you have a great 2017. Thanks for watching. See you guys later.